Well, good morning. It's last night they had the two big football games on last night to see who was going to go to the Super Bowl. And I couldn't help but to see at the beginning of the Kansas City Chiefs-Bills game, this guy's name was Mecole Hardman, and he's a punt returner. And a wide receiver. So what he does is this ball gets punted to him, and he's got to catch it. And he's got 11 guys breathing down his throat. And so the first punt that he received, he fumbled it, and it basically almost went into the end zone. And then the other team, the Buffalo Bills, got the ball, and then like the next play scored a touchdown on national TV, prime time for the Super Bowl, to get to the Super Bowl. And his reaction, so they wear these big coats. You ever seen the football players? They have like these huge, like poncho types of coats that they put on them. And they appear out of nowhere. There's like all these slaves, all these people behind the scenes just putting coats on these guys. And they're big, massive men, so I don't know what they need a coat for. But anyway, he goes over to the bench, which is heated, obviously, because football players need heated bench. And so he's sitting there. And somebody gives him a coat, and he curls up, and he hides underneath the coat. And he's just like this. And the announcer goes, "Hardman is trying to hide." And it's interesting, right? Because when we know stuff happens in us and we don't like stuff about us or embarrassing moments about us, don't we wish we could just go hide in a corner somewhere? St. Paul, and the key to his conversion, as Fulton Sheen would say, is a Greek word, scallop, Scallop. Not scallop that you eat, like a scallop. Those are really good, by the way, Father Mike and I are learning how to make scallops. They're very delicious. Just a little butter on both sides, and boom, you can pop those babies in. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. A scallop, you can hear it in the 12th chapter of 2 Corinthians, which, by the way, if you do one thing today in terms of spiritual reading, I would highly suggest you pick up the second book of Corinthians, chapter 12. 2:12 Corinthians, something like that. You don't think about that. But anyway, 2 Corinthians 12. And in that, he talks about this. He goes, "I don't boast of myself," which he could have, because he basically started the church, after Peter. And he goes, "But I don't boast of myself. I only boast of Jesus. And the only thing that I boast of is my weakness." And he goes, "Well, what's his weakness?" There's a terrible translation in most Bibles of the word scallop, which is like thorn or a splinter. And okay, if you got a thorn or you had a splinter, that would hurt. It would drive you crazy, right? But it really isn't a little piece of thorn. It's a stake. A stake. Like when you're trying to mark out land, what do? You use like a big stick and you drive it into the ground. That's what he said. He goes, "I have a stake in my flesh, a scallop." It's more like what drove into the nails of Jesus's, the nails that is driven into Jesus's hand, or the spear that would go in his side. That's what a scallop is. And going even deeper into that, it's like, what is our kryptonite? Like, this made him weak in front of everybody, and he was beaten and tortured, and whenever he would go into communities, they could see whatever. We don't really know exactly what the specific stake or the scallop was for St. Paul. Fulton Sheen's thought was because he could hear it today, he was blinded, and he never really recovered his sight perfectly. So stuff would ooze out of his eyes, and there was something there that would blind him. They're not really sure. That's what Fulton Sheen's idea. Nobody really knows. But whatever it was repulsive to the world. It made him want to hide. It made him want to, like, "Ooh, don't touch that. That's like that will make me fester." So his scallop, the stake that was in St. Paul's side, was something that truly was repulsive to the rest of the world. He wanted to get underneath that coat and just curl up in a ball in front of that. But the conversion of St. Paul is all about our scallop. And it's like, what do we do with the scallop? Like, We just fumbled the ball on national television, and my team thus got scored upon. And early in the game, it looked bleak. And you know what the attitude of the Kansas City Chiefs was? Line up Hardman and give him the ball and let him run with it. And he made this amazing, 80-yard run. And then you know what else they did? They doubled down on that vulnerability of Hardman, and they lined him up 2 yards off the side of the thing, threw him the ball, and he scores a touchdown. Yeah, that's what God does. That's what it is. That's what Paul discovered. That in your weakness, when you boast of that weakness, what happens? God's greatness comes out. What is the natural tendency of all of us? Is in those weaknesses, we just want to curl up in a ball and hide behind them, thinking, as long as nobody knows this, I'll be good to go. But Paul's like, no, that's not the way Jesus works. And so today's a good day for us. And we all know what our scallops are. We know those things that just drive like a stake right into the depths, the sinews, right where the flesh and the soul meet. Right into there. And that's what Jesus wants to take. Our weakness, our scallop. And through that, glorify the Father. Through that, make us the saints that He's envisioned us and dreamed us to be. Now, don't think like I made up any of this homily, because I really didn't. I didn't really do it. But this is what one of the greatest preachers of all time, and since it's a daily mass thing, I don't really care about time right now. And those of you on the internet, well, you can leave whenever you want, so it doesn't matter to me. So this is St. John Chrysostom's thoughts on this St. Paul Day, which we as priests get to read today. Just listen to this. This is like awesome stuff. He's called the Golden Tongue, and he would go on for 2 hours. So don't worry, you still have about an hour and 45 minutes left there of this homily. Thus, amid the traps set for Paul by his enemies, with exultant heart, he turned their every attack into a victory for himself. Constantly beaten, abused, and cursed, he boasted of it as though he were celebrating a triumphal procession and taking trophies home. And he offered thanks to God for all of it. Thanks be to God who is always victorious in us. That is why Paul, far more eager for the shameful abuse than his zeal in preaching, brought upon him than we all are most pleasing in honors, more eager for death than we are for life, more for poverty than we are for wealth. He yearned for toil more than rest. The one thing Paul feared, the one thing he dreaded, was to offend God. Nothing else could sway him. Therefore, the only thing he really wanted was always to please God. The most important thing of all to him, however, was that he knew himself to be loved by Christ. Enjoying this love, he considered himself happier than anyone else. Were he without it, it would be no satisfaction to be the friend of principalities or powers. He preferred to be thus loved and to be the least of all, or even to be among the damned, than to be without love, and to be among the great and honored. To be separated from that love was in his eyes the greatest and most extraordinary torment. The pain that was lost would have alone been hell and endless torture. And so St. John Chrysostom concludes, Paul set no store by the things that fill our visible world, any more than a man sets value on the withered grass of a field. As for tyrannical rulers or people enraged against him, he paid them no more heed than a gnat. Death itself and pain and whatever torments might come were mere child's play to him, provided that thereby he might bear some burden for the sake of Christ. Therein lies the key. It's not just vulnerability for vulnerability's sake, or the stake and the pain of the stake, or whatever our weakness, or the thing that we confess the most. Or if you ever want to know what your real scallop is, just start praying the litany of humility, and then you'll see what your scallop is. And it's not just knowing that and festering it, just take it in. It's that meek understanding that it's in that Jesus can love us the most. It's in that we discover the greatest gift of all, that the love of the Lord embraces and even redeems the deepest wounds of our hearts. Let us pray today that St. Paul, through his intercession in this beautiful church, or who's his patron saint, can help us discover that deep scallop in our life and see how deeper Jesus' love for us, that can use that and take that and make us the saint that the Lord wants us to be.